Hitler, a man so evil he ruined an entire mustache style. If anyone deserved to die, this man was it. Here's the craziest ways history's most notorious villain was almost rubbed out. Bad schnitzel. Way back when Hitler was first embarking into politics, some brave citizen heard Hitler speak and smelled trouble for Germany. This prompted the unknown individual or group of individuals to try and eliminate Hitler before it was too late. As Hitler and his staff had dinner at the Hotel Kaiserhof in Berlin, they shortly after became seriously ill. Poisoning was immediately suspected, but alas, whoever carried out the assassination attempt failed to realize that Hitler was a vegetarian and thus was spared. Next time a vegan tries to tell you meat is murder, remind them that vegetables basically killed over 40 million people in World War II. The pen is mightier than the sword, especially if it's poisoned. It takes a special kind of man for people to want to kill you twice in the same year. In February of 1932, Ludwig Assner, a member of the Bavarian State Parliament, didn't exactly like the cut of Hitler's jib. He penned a poisoned letter to Hitler, but an acquaintance of Assner's spilled the tea and the letter was intercepted. Mercenary death. In 1934, Hitler had been named Chancellor of Germany, but not everyone was triumphantly throwing up their arms in Nazi salutes. In fact, many political and military leaders were extremely wary of Hitler and his Nazi government. To solve this little problem, Hitler kicked off what would become known as the Night of the Long Knives, a series of political killings that effectively eliminated or silenced any opposition to Hitler. Beppo Romer, a member of a German mercenary unit, vowed revenge. He and a group of men made plans to kill Hitler, but sadly the Gestapo would catch on to the plot before any real progress had been made. Sometimes crazy can take care of crazy, or at least try to. Murder from within. When Romer failed to kill Hitler, Helmut Milius, a member of the right-wing radical small-class party, took matters into his own hand. Under his direction, 160 men infiltrated the SS in order to conduct secret surveillance on Hitler. Milius quickly learned Hitler's schedule and daily routines, allowing him to plot the perfect time to kill him. Yet again, the Gestapo, who we have to admit was super on the ball, discovered the plot and put a stop to it. Milius managed to avoid any serious punishment due to the influence of German Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, who would go on to be one of Germany's best generals in the Second World War. Allegiance to country, not a man. A year later, a group of government officials from the German Foreign Office knew that they had to act to prevent a disaster. They weren't buying Hitler's Make Germany Great Again and insisted that Hitler was leading the company to disaster, not a resurgence of her glorious imperial days. They knew they had to do something to save the nation they loved, even if it meant killing the man who now ruled it. The group attempted to drum up support with a letter where they penned, "The oath of allegiance to Hitler has lost its meaning since he's ready to sacrifice Germany." Sadly, the plot never took off and the world hurtled ever forward into global war. Explosive briefcases. By 1936, Hitler had whipped up hatred for Jews across much of Germany, and German Jew Helmut Hirsch knew he had to act. He filled 2 suitcases with explosives with a plan to plant them inside the Nazi Party headquarters in Nuremberg. Unfortunately, a Gestapo informant learned of the plot and Hirsch was discovered. Pronounced guilty, Hirsch was executed via beheading, a far better fate than many of his fellow Jews would suffer in the years to come. Back to the crazy though, our next assassin thought he could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Crazy killer. You know you're a terrible person when even insane people want you dead. That's exactly what happened in November of 1937, when mental patient Joseph Thomas traveled all the way to Berlin to shoot Hitler. However, Thomas also had a beef with the Nazi head of the Air Force, Hermann Göring, and plotted to assassinate both on the same day. Discovered by police, Thomas spilled the beans on himself, putting an end to the plot. Interestingly enough, it may have been a good thing that Göring was in fact not killed by Thomas. In the build-up to the war, under Göring's direction, the Luftwaffe did not add any significant number of long-range heavy bombers to its fleet, a move that would haunt Germany during the Battle of England, as it was forced to attack with light and medium bombers only. Further, Göring's inflated ego assured Hitler that his Luftwaffe would be able to keep German troops under siege in Russia supplied, and thus Hitler did not dispatch ground forces to relieve them. This strategic blunder would spell disaster for over 100,000 German soldiers, and for the war effort against the Soviet Union. That one time the Allies saved Hitler's life. Yeah, you heard that right. The same allies that Hitler would go on to nearly crush saved Hitler's life just before the war began. In September of 1938, conservatives in the German army feared what a renewed war against the Western Allies might do to the nation. They could smell disaster on the horizon, despite all the Nazi propaganda to the contrary. They vowed to enact a coup the moment Hitler declared war on Czechoslovakia, eliminating Hitler and placing the exiled Wilhelm II back on the throne as emperor. Much to their astonishment, Britain and France agreed to the annexation of the Sudetenland in a bid to appease Hitler, and thus the risk of war was temporarily removed. The group nixed their plans to replace Hitler, for the time being. That wouldn't be the last time the Allies saved Hitler's life. But next is an assassin who wanted to kill Hitler for pretty wild reasons. Killing Hitler in order to make Russia great again? Maurice Bavaud was a Swiss theology student and a member of an anti-communist group in France. The group's leader, Marcel Gerbohe, convinced Bavaud and others that he was in fact a member of the Romanov dynasty who had escaped execution at the hands of the dirty Bolsheviks. In fact, Gerbohe was full of Bolshevik himself, but that didn't stop him from convincing Bavaud that if he murdered Hitler, it would somehow help end communism in Russia and the Romanovs could retake the country for themselves. As if that would be much better. Bavaud traveled to Germany in 1938 and bought a pistol, then remarked to a policeman how he'd like to meet Hitler personally. The police officer suggested he travel to Munich for the anniversary of the 1923 beer hall putsch, which Hitler attended every year. Bavaud bought himself a ticket to the event on the reviewing stand and posed as a reporter, prepared to bust a cap the moment Hitler strolled by. Unfortunately, Bavaud aborted the attempt as Hitler was in company of other Nazis that Bavaud didn't want to accidentally injure, which makes about as much sense to us as it does to you. Bavaud now used the last remaining bit of his money to purchase expensive stationery and forged a letter of introduction under the name of French nationalist leader and friend to the Nazi, Pierre Titonji. He took the letter with the hopes of using it to gain an audience with Hitler to Berchtesgaden, but Hitler had decided to remain in Munich. Broke and destitute, Bavaud was forced to stow away on a train to Paris, but was discovered by the conductor. Interrogated by the Gestapo, who again were seriously on the ball, Bavaud admitted to the assassination plot and was executed. Hitler's abundant and incredible luck. Back in World War I, Hitler narrowly avoided being exploded after the exact spot he'd been standing in just moments prior became ground zero for a British artillery round. The explosive luck, get it, would last well into Hitler's life and pay off yet again in October 1939. On a victory parade of Warsaw after Hitler's conquest of Poland, Polish Army General Michael Karasowicz Tokarewski hatched a plan to blow Hitler sky high with explosives buried under his parade route. In a stroke of insane luck, Hitler's parade was diverted at the last minute and completely avoided the planted explosives. And because life is 100% not fair, history's biggest a-hole also happened to be history's luckiest man. Even more explosive luck. Just a month after being nearly blown up, Hitler was once again nearly blown up. For weeks, German carpenter George Elser planned the construction of a timed bomb inside one of Germany's largest beer halls, where he knew Der Fuhrer would soon be making his annual speech in commemoration of the beer hall putsch. The bomb was planted just a few feet away from where Hitler would eventually stand, its timer muffled by a cork. The bomb was timed to go off right in the middle of Hitler's speech, but with World War II on his mind, Hitler cut his speech off early and rushed back to Berlin to convene with his military leaders. Instead of Hitler, the bomb killed 8 others and injured over 60, with the ceiling collapsing right where Hitler had been standing. The subsequent crackdown by the Gestapo made the components needed to create explosives so difficult that multiple other assassination attempts in the works had to be canceled after the organizers were unable to get their hands on the needed explosives. If you fail, try again. In 1939, Beppo Romer was released from prison for his 1934 attempt to murder Hitler. Apparently, either the authorities had not been too impressed with Romer or were convinced that he was a reformed man. They would be extremely wrong. Romer joined a resistance group of German intellectuals named the Soul Circle, who were dedicated to opposing the Nazi Party at every possible opportunity. The group tracked Hitler's movements carefully, but Hitler's security had been dramatically increased due to all the pesky attempts on his life. Failing to find an opportunity to strike, the Soul Circle was eventually discovered and its members arrested in a Gestapo sting. The Soul Circle members were betrayed from within by a Gestapo spy, pretending to be a Swiss sympathizer, and most would meet their end via torture and execution. There was the one time Hitler was almost blown up by his own tanks. Even his own army wanted him dead. Many German generals were starting to warm up to the fact that Hitler was leading their nation to disaster by 1943. A group of them plotted to arrest Hitler upon his visit to a military detachment in Ukraine. One general's tanks would surround Hitler and his escorts completely, and if Hitler refused to surrender, they would simply kill everyone. Hitler's visit was cancelled at the last minute, and once more Das Fuhrer escaped certain death. Multiple attempts all in the same day. March 13, 1943 would be the day Hitler would evade certain death 3 times, and he never even had a clue. First, a group of officers vowed to kill Hitler as he drove from the airport to a local army headquarters. Hitler, however, was accompanied by a heavy SS escort, and the plan was cancelled. Briefly delayed to lunch, a new plan was put into effect. During their lunch together, at a specified signal, several officers would rise and fire their pistols at Hitler. Hitler, however, was a no-show, and the plan was cancelled. In a last-ditch effort to kill the luckiest SOB in history, a bomb was camouflaged as liquor bottles and planted on Hitler's airplane. The timer was set to blow as the plane was in flight and over Poland. However, the plane's hold iced over from the extreme temperatures and the fuse of the bomb failed. Our next killer's weapon of choice would be hugging and explosives. The death hug. Hitler's luck was so unbelievable that we wouldn't blame you for fact-checking us on the sheer number of times Hitler avoided death, purely by coincidence. Just a week after he was almost gunned down twice and then blown out of the sky, Hitler would evade death yet again. German officer Rudolf Christoph Freiherr von Gersdorf decided Hitler had to go at any cost. Hitler, along with several prominent Nazi and military figures, planned to visit Gersdorf at a Berlin armory where they could inspect captured Soviet weapons. Gersdorf then set about packing his coat pockets with time-delayed explosives, set for 10 minutes. Just as Hitler arrived, Gersdorf set off the timers, with a plan to hug Hitler right before the explosives went off, in order to ensure his death. It would be a suicide attack, but a necessary sacrifice for Germany. Incredibly, Hitler breezed through the entire exhibition in less than 10 minutes, which prompted Gersdorf to rush to a bathroom in order to disarm the explosives. The Allies saved Hitler's life again. In late 1943, the Allies were pushing back hard against the Luftwaffe's domination of Europe's skies. This opened up opportunities for Allied planes to raid German infrastructure. One such raid would end up saving Hitler's life. The German army was preparing to put out a new winter uniform, and Major Axel von den Bussche was chosen to model it for Hitler in a private viewing. Bussche was tall, handsome, and blonde, and blue-eyed, basically the perfect Nazi in Hitler's view. But Bussche actually planned to kill Hitler during the viewing by detonating a mine he would be carrying in his backpack. The planned viewing, however, was cancelled when an Allied air raid destroyed the rail car containing the new uniforms. Hitler, immune to explosives. By 1944, it was clear that Germany was losing the war. It was largely due to Hitler's ineptitude as a military leader. A group of senior German military officials concocted what would be known as Operation Valkyrie, as they attempted to kill Hitler and make peace with the Western Allies as soon as possible in order to avoid the complete destruction of Germany. The conspirators managed to plant a 2.2-pound bomb in a briefcase inside a meeting room where Hitler and his senior military advisors would discuss the ongoing war. Incredibly, Colonel Heinz Brandt is believed to have nudged the briefcase behind one of the legs of the table, effectively deflecting the bomb blast and sparing Hitler's life. Now, check out insane ways USA tried to take out Fidel Castro, or click this other video instead.